In this extraordinary edition of Grok the Talk, two great minds come together to shed some much-needed light on the now decade-old horror known as 911. Dr. Judy Wood, with a BS in Civil Engineering, an MS in Engineering Mechanics, and a PhD in Materials Engineering Science, and her vast experience and expertise in biomimicry, interferometry, and over 60 technical publications, brings her professionally skilled eye to the forensic analysis of what happened on that fateful day. It is not an overstatement to say that her book, Where Did the Towers Go?, is one of the most important books of our time. You can access the wealth of information that she has made available at drjudywood.com. And her book, which is the definitive forensic analysis of 911, can be purchased at, and this is all in lowercase letters, wheredidthetowersgo.com. John Lash is a renowned comparative mythologist, often referred to as the worthy successor of Joseph Campbell. His book, Not in His Image, is perhaps the most liberating book that one can ever have the pleasure of reading. His unparalleled expertise in the study of world mythology and the Gnostic tradition plays a key role in helping to unravel the stories and the psyops that were embedded into the very fabric of 911. His website is a veritable online university and is a treasure house of knowledge and instruction. One of his greatest accomplishments is his restoration of the sacred story of Gaia Sophia, which recounts the origin of the Earth and the human species from the galactic core. His website can be accessed at metahistory.org. And of course, my series of planetary Tantra talks, now 15 in number, along with the 2-hour Sophia Myth interview, can be downloaded here at Grok the Talk. So it is with great honor that I present this all-important talk on the puzzle wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in a puzzle, known as 911. So as usual, sit back, get centered, and relax, because here we go. Okay, and welcome to a very, very special edition of Grok the Talk. Here on the 10th, I hate to use the word anniversary, but the 10th anniversary of the horrendous events of 911. I would like to start out, before I bring John and Dr. Wood on the line, to say that I have spent countless hours with both of these two wonderful people, and I can say that outside of my Aikido teachers here in Japan, they are the two people I respect most in the world. They're two giants of the intellect, of the intuitive perspective, and a very unique ability to see with innocence and to see things out of the box. And in addition to all that, they've both been extremely professional, good-mannered, and impeccably good friends to have. So kind of going around the clock here, I'm here at 6 a.m. in the morning, and next on the dial is Dr. Wood at 4 p.m., and John Lash in Spain at 11 p.m. So, Dr. Wood, you're kind of sandwiched in here by two Gaian warriors, and it is my honor, and I'm sure John's honor, to stand by your side. So if you could both kind of chime in here and just say a couple opening words. First, Dr. Wood.
Thanks. It's 5 p.m. here.
5 p.m., okay.
I was actually thinking about that, how remarkable our technology is, that you picture a globe and where these points are around the planet. Pretty amazing. South Carolina in the United States, in Spain, and in Japan. That's pretty widespread. And it seems like we're all in the same place.
Indeed. It's a very nice connection. Very nice. And John?
Yeah, it is remarkable that we can do this. And, of course, we are having a discussion today about a subject that does concern the entire planet. So we're lucky that we have the opportunity to connect for that discussion, even though we're geographically in very different places.
Indeed, indeed. So we're going to cover some very heavy subjects today. Here at the outset, I would like to read a brief statement, and it goes like this. On 911, over a half a mile of vertical building height, containing nearly 150 football fields of floor space, was reduced to a near-level field of dust and debris, where rescue workers walked horizontally or rappelled into empty caverns to look for survivors. How was this possible, given the standard laws of engineering and physics? The 9/11 Commission report bypassed this central issue, as did the report of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, contrary to its stated objective of determining why and how World Trade Center 1 and 2 collapsed. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, made the stunning admission that it did not investigate how the towers fell. Neither the standard view that the Twin Towers collapsed from fire, nor the standard opposition view that they were intentionally detonated by thermite explosives explain the evidence, nor do they follow the laws of engineering and physics. All right, so today we are going to be considering the scientific evidence of the destruction and the psyops that was perpetrated together, the psychological destruction, with Dr. Wood focusing on the former and John Lash on the latter of mixing and matching. All right, so to begin with, I want to get one thing right out here, out in the front and out in the open and clear it up, and that is, Dr. Wood, I would like to get a disclaimer from you about Richard C. Hoagland and how he has claimed that he was in contact with you and had your permission to use your work.
I've never corresponded with him. He's never talked with me on the phone or in person. I've never met him in person. Never emailed between us. So that can't be the case. And one thing I would like to add is, and anyone who knows me knows how meticulous I am about details, if someone else presents my work, chances are they're not going to get it right. They're going to misrepresent it. And then people repeat what they say, and it keeps getting, distorted further on down the line, like that children's game of rumors. You tell one person something, and by the time it gets around the circle, it's something completely different. So it's important to start from the source. And this is something I've been working on for a number of years, getting suppressed by others. And so it leaves me very uncomfortable when what I say is suppressed and then somebody else pretends to represent it. It's unethical, actually, to present someone else's research because of that very issue.
Indeed, yes. And if he was so supportive of you, he should have just asked that you come and do the presentation, of course.
I agree. So I don't know, why things happen the way they do, but so be it.
Indeed. Okay, I'm glad to get that out in the open. And one more point on that is on his Facebook, people have claimed when I post things there that I am actually you. So we've heard two different voices speaking at the same time. So know that this is Thomas Malone in Japan and Dr. Wood in the States. So we are two separate people. All right. Okay, so that's out of the way. And
I don't go to Facebook. I figure there's enough data collected on me. I don't go to Facebook because I'm afraid that that's what it's all about. Indeed it is.
All right. So let's go ahead and get into the heart of things here. Now, you've been interviewed countless times, Dr. Wood, on the net, so we have the evidence out there in the open, and of course your book and your website. So today I don't want to go too deeply into the evidence per se. I want to take us into something a little bit more than a 911 1.0. So I want to start this out with the first question for both of you. Why is the truth movement so afraid of your work, Dr. Wood? And could you take the first answer, please?
Well, it's someone pointed out recently that there's no reason to try to debunk someone unless you have something to lose, like if you have a particular agenda. If you're in search of the truth, nothing should fear you. Nothing should cause you to be afraid of it. And it is quite puzzling why, I seem to be the enemy. And I'm not in the truth movement. I'm not competing with anybody. I'm just looking for the truth. And the truth doesn't have sides. It isn't divisive. If everyone's aiming for the truth, everyone should be on the same page and go in the same direction. So it should be actually unifying instead of divisive.
Indeed. And so what would be the fear factor in their perspective?
I can only guess at a couple of things. One is, it's this agenda that they're taught, and folks, after they're taught something, first impressions stick. They have their emotions invested in it. Once they have their emotions invested in it, they don't want to give it up. They feel like they own it somehow, and it becomes a territorial thing. Or they're involved in the agenda. I think most of the people in the truth movement are just following leaders, playing follow the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so it only takes a few leaders to start steering things astray. And what I like to ask people is, whoever planned 9/11, do you think it just slipped their mind and they forgot to plan a cover-up? Of course they would plan a cover-up. So what would the cover-up look like? There are going to be people asking questions and poking around. What do you do with those people? You round them up and contain them. Keep them out of trouble. And you also train them to attack anyone who is speaking the truth. Because then you can keep that from being heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually more effort might go into the cover-up because it's a much longer ongoing process than the actual event itself.
Right, it has to last forever, or until the clock runs out.
Right, the cover-up is designed to last for the very long term, and I hope that in the course of this conversation we'll get to look again, but perhaps from an entirely different point of view so far, as to what exactly the cover-up is, So we'll get to that, Thomas, I think, because it's in the notes, but if I just might add a brief comment to what Dr. Wood has said. I think that there are a lot of people in the truth movement who are not afraid of her work and who would respond very positively to it. When we talk about the truth movement, I think we have to make a clear distinction between all those people who want to know the truth about 9/11, which includes me and you too as well. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to know what really happened at 9/11, how it was done, who did it and why, is part of the truth movement. Everyone who acknowledges that the official story of Muslim hijackers is a lie is part of the truth movement. The problem is not with people in the truth movement in general. The problem is with the designated leaders of the truth movement. They're the ones that are very much afraid of Dr. Wood's work. And there are any number of reasons for that being so. I'll just point out two, which I consider to be glaringly obvious. First of all, the evidence that she presents and the case she builds on that evidence for what happened in terms of science at 9/11, at Ground Zero, is irrefutable. Mm-hmm. And they are terrified of her evidence and her argument because they cannot refute it. They cannot, in a fair argument, refute what she says. And her evidence clearly refutes the thermite theory of controlled demolition. So that's one reason why they're afraid. Another reason why they're afraid is because the designated leaders, that would be Gage and Jones, and the people who have clustered around them, have been hideously duped. And either they are pure dupes who've been caught in the psyops of 9/11, or they are accomplices and accessories to that psyops. I couldn't really say. But they're either one or the other. And in that case, they certainly are afraid of anybody or anything who would expose that dupery. And so I think they're not just afraid. I think, if you'll pardon the allusion to this term, they're in terror. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they have good reason to be. So that's my comment on why they're afraid of Dr. Wood's work.
Indeed. Dr. Wood, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I was looking at some various definitions. In various techniques that they try to cover it up, they don't want anyone to look at my book. My book is pure empirical evidence, and it leads to a conclusion that's conclusive evidence. And so how do you cover that up? You call it a theory. You call it a theory, then you can say, oh, there's no evidence that supports her theories and speculation. They call it theories. It's a favorite one. And I'd like to ask if by theory they mean speculation, because there's no speculation in my work. I build a case on evidence like a detective solving a crime. What I present is conclusive evidence, and being conclusive evidence, it puts an end to the debating by reason of irrefutability. That's what the meaning of the word conclusive is. Serving, by Webster Dictionary, serving to put an end to all debate and questioning. And so if my evidence puts an end to all the debate and questioning, then what can they do with it? The party's over.
That's right. The party's over in terms of speculation, but the real party begins in terms of getting to the truth. And I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Wood, that truth unifies. When people accuse you of causing division in the 9/11 movement, that is absolutely ridiculous and irrational, and it's slanderous and deceptive, because you have produced pure evidence, and the pure evidence leads us to the truth, and the truth is what we all come together on. So it's 10 years down the road now, and it's time to see if we can come together on 9/11 in the truth and not in speculations and theories. The moment has come to see if we can do that. And that's why we're having this three-way conversation this evening, isn't it?
Yes. One thing I'd like to add is that my definition of truth movement is more of this, group, because of how I've come to know it. I think if there's truth seekers, and they're individuals, and they organize. The organization I refer to as the truth movement, but that's a definition difference.
No, I follow that
what
distinction.
It means.
Right, I follow that distinction there. But there are many truth seekers who are quite willing to look at your work and who are impeded by doing so by the designated leaders of the truth movement. And this is a situation that's got to give and got to break, and is breaking as we speak.
It's funny that you use the word break there, because I had written in my notes that Dr. Wood's book is kind of like a dam break. And once this book got out last December, it's flooded some of the little boats out there on the lake that were trying to hang on to this group, this truth movement. And Dr. Wood, you've relayed to myself and other people that you're seeing a lot of people jumping boat, in a sense, coming over and saying, "Hey, you were right."
Right. They say that it's irrefutable. They can't find anything wrong with it. Well, you can't if it's evidence. It's pure evidence. And there's been a lot of, I've kind of casually referred to them as defectors, who are leaving the organized truth movement and realizing they've been duped. They've been led down a blind alley, down a dead-end street. Mm-hmm. And that's how cover-ups, I think, work.
That is indeed how cover-ups work, yes.
That's right.
People are led into confusion, and then they're offered false solutions. This is how the PSYOPs operates. There's an enormous PSYOPs around 9/11, and it's beginning to dawn on me now, as I've been paying closer and closer attention to Dr. Wood's work, that on the scientific foundation that she's provided for the evidence of what was done and how it was done, from that foundation, we can start to look at the PSYOPs that was built around it and start to deconstruct and break down the PSYOPs. And, of course, doing that is a matter of great interest to me, because my area of knowledge is not science as such, but is mythology, which deals with narratives and belief systems and the construction of narratives and myths. So that's my specialty, and so I find the challenge, which is now before us, to deconstruct the psyops of 9/11 to be extremely exciting, and I think we're on the threshold, we could be on the threshold of a tremendous breakthrough for humanity. This is a very, very crucial moment.
I totally agree. I sense a big change is just happening in the past few days, even. And it seems like the wind has just changed directions.
Indeed. And I will add one more point there before we go into the next question. The focus now in the alternative, the opposition theory, is that nanothermite or thermite was used. And as that's losing its appeal, they're starting to bring in the mini nukes and the torsion Nazi whatever ideas of a torsion field weapon. So be on the lookout for these new ploys that are coming up as well.
If they can keep a whole bunch of things juggling in the air at the same time, like balls, just have a whole bunch of stuff churning around, you're bound to have something that's going to appeal to someone, but it'll also give the appearance that the answer is unknown. And as long as that is convincing enough to enough people, they don't keep looking. Like, sigh, we'll never find out what really happened. Might as well quit looking. Let's move on. That's part of the objective as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Not realizing that the truth is knowable and known to those who have looked for it.
Yes, truth is noble. This is a standard, from my understanding, from the pagan world, which is based on where morality was based on the concepts of honesty, honor, and truth, which is not the morality that rules in our world today. But I think, Dr. Wood, you're absolutely right. Again, you have a very savvy understanding because you've looked at this so closely. Not only the scientific aspect, but you've also looked at the other aspects of it, obviously, the psyops. You understand that the psyops worked by just wearing people down, and it has been very effective, and eventually they just want to give up and say, well, we can never know. But then on the other hand, I see a current playing against that. That's even stronger, especially in the last month, and as you say, even in the last few days. And that is the current of outrage, of just being sick and tired of being lied to and deceived, And behind that outrage, there is a desire to know the truth. So I think that it's a war between these two things. Can the psyops prevail? Can it wear people down? Can it confuse and divide people until the end of time, Or is our natural, honorable desire for the truth going to rise up and make a difference? And I can't call it, but we're right on the knife edge right now.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Indeed. All right. We could go on this thread for quite some time as well, but let's go ahead and jump into more of the heart of the matter in a sense. So the subtitle of your book is that evidence of directed free energy technology on 911. So for some people that might be kind of difficult to understand. What is the connection between the use of this as a weapon, an obvious weapon that took the lives of almost 3,000 people and destroyed a huge section of New York City, and that connection with free energy used as a positive technology? Could you kind of clarify that connection for us?
Yes. Early in the early days of this, I was attacked. Well, I've always been attacked, but I was attacked when folks would say, well, there's not enough energy on the planet. It would take 5 times the Earth's output of energy in order to destroy the towers. Well, why aren't the towers there then? Obviously, that energy came from somewhere. The towers are gone. That's something that is undeniable to anyone. Well, were they there to begin with? Well, I've been up to them. I've touched them in 1976 and 75. So I know that they were there then, and they're not there now. That's a lot of mass to go away. And so we do know that they went away. And you start looking at more of how they went away, it becomes very revealing. As I say, the towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair. And I know that because the lack of seismic signal, the lack of appropriate size of debris pile, and the lack of a broken bathtub, which would have allowed Manhattan to be flooded.
And I would just add the vast amount of dust that was created, that was observed.
Exactly. And there's this dust all over the place. But dust came from someplace, and we don't see any, much of any building remnants. So instead of the molecules being attracted to each other, they were repelling each other. That is a change in the molecular basis of matter. I mean, that's affecting that. It's unleashing this unbelievable energy from somewhere. So it's obviously tapped into a way of getting energy, what is often referred to as free energy. And it's my understanding that Nikola Tesla wanted to give the world free energy about 100 years ago, but was afraid to for fear it would fall into the wrong hands and that it would be used for evil purposes. Well, been there, done that. It's happened. So that risk is no longer there. It can be used for good now.
Right, or you could say that the risk that Tesla foresaw, and he should have known, because if we credit him with being a valid scientist who did actually discover this energy, the risk that he foresaw has been demonstrated, okay? And yet there's an enormous irony in that, because in the very fact that the risk of weaponized free energy that Tesla feared has been demonstrated, it also demonstrates that it is real, that free energy as such is a real, feasible technology. And so as horrible as it is, as horrible as the events of 9/11 are, they do carry that message. They do declare undeniably to the entire planet that this free energy physics and the technology that goes with it is possible and actually exists today. And so then the responsibility falls on us who want a peaceful world to say, we must claim this. We must claim this for the good of the world and for benevolent uses in society. So the challenge of 9/11 is not merely to find out who did it, to understand the evil behind it, and we must face that challenge, but it's also to open to that fantastic opportunity that it showed us, albeit in a most horrific manner.
Right. There's other aspects of it as well. On the cover of my book, call it Where'd the Towers Go? Because the towers are gone. But where did the towers go? There's a picture of the North Tower just frothing up into dust. You look at that picture, and anyone who saw that and who looks at the cover picture, you're right, it's undeniable to anyone on the planet. You hear so many people claiming to have developed a free energy device, and then you later hear that they suicided themselves or something else happened. It never gets out on the market because there's one or two people, and then there's various campaigns designed to discredit them, and round it goes. But this event, it's plain as day to anyone who looks that it's right there. You don't need to question, does it work or not? Well, are the towers there? It's as certain as the towers are gone.
That's right. And that means that it's as certain as the towers are gone and the manner in which they disappeared. When we really look at it, when we really go back and look at the photographs and even go look at the film clips, although we must be careful of the hoaxing and the rigging of those film clips, but when we go back and look at what appears to be a demolition, what appears to be buildings falling into the ground, with your evidence, we really see that they didn't fall at all. And we can see it with our own eyes now when we go revisit that. And that is such an awakening. It has been to me, and I know it is to more and more people all the time. Because if we can see that energy demonstrated destructively right in front of our eyes, just imagine what could be done with it if it were turned to peaceful purposes. It's really breathtaking, and it's really the positive side of 9/11 that has been, I think that's been one of the side effects of your book, because it brings up the free energy issue, is that it has pointed us to the positive side of this horrific event, and done so in a way that's really exciting. You know, unfortunately, I just want to say this about the 9/11 truth movement, the Thermite Gang, and those who claim that the buildings collapsed into their own footprint at free fall speed due to planted demolitions. Those of you who are listening to this interview who have found credibility in that theory, just go and look at the pictures, some of the pictures in Dr. Wood's book. Look at the coring out of building WT6. Look at some of the anomalous effects that occurred at Ground Zero that day. It's true that WTC7 fell later in the afternoon, and it looks like it fell. It looks like the walls fell. But look at the picture. There's no debris of 47 stories of WTC7. There's no debris. The walls were like an empty shell that just dissolved and descended at the final moment. But there's no debris pile there. There's a few girders and a little heaps of this and that. There's no office furniture. There's no tables. There's no filing cabinets. Nothing. So
and it didn't even spill across the street all the way.
Didn't spill across the street to any other buildings, and it didn't even make a seismic signal equivalent to quarry explosions that occurred in the same day in a different state. So this is irrefutable evidence, and what's really exciting about this evidence is that it shows the existence of a technology that belongs to humanity and needs to be claimed back for humanity in one way or another. I can't say I know how we're going to do that, but the first step is to admit that it's there and stop pretending that it never existed and could never have been invented. And also, stop listening to the physicists and scientists who come out and tell us point blank in an authoritative manner that free energy physics and free energy technology is impossible.
That's the big point, isn't it? Before 2001, people who believed there was free energy technology available but didn't have the conclusive evidence. It was always a vague feeling in your mind. Now, all you got to do is look at it. That's it. That's the biggest proof you're ever going to get, that it exists, and it exists on a very big scale.
That's
500 years ago, people probably said electricity was just fictitious. I don't know why it wasn't around 500 years ago. It probably was. It just got hidden again. But the issue of electricity and magnetism interacting. I think we've all done this as a small child. Get a wire and wrap it around a nail, plug it into a 9-volt battery, and you turn that nail into a magnet. Mm-hmm. And how hydroelectric power plants work is moving a conductor through a magnetic field, produces electricity. Voila, out of nowhere, it seems. Yeah, there is motion involved, but turning a rotating magnet into electricity along a wire, that just seems like magic.
But it's elementary physics. And I'm sure that when it's taught in universities and when it's disclosed to the world at large, what are the laws and formulas of free energy physics, it will also be elementary, because it has to be based in the most fundamental and simple laws of the universe. And the universe is, at its base, fundamentally and essentially simple. And it's because in our minds, we can't often reach that simplicity, but it is there, and the greatest physical discoveries come from that, I believe.
An example I like to give to the non-believers is tornadoes. Where does that energy come from that has horrendous destructive forces in it? It's that's the same kind of energy.
That's right.
That's right, and some of the signposts of what happened on 9/11 are very, very similar to what happens with tornadoes as well.
Right, except what happened on 9/11 is just more organized. It had a discrete boundary of, where it operated. It didn't go down the street wandering.
And while we're talking about the proof of free energy physics, we can also look at the ancient past. We can look at the pyramids. We can look at the megalithic monuments that have been constructed in all places around the world, from Polynesia to the British Isles to China, these or Baalbek in Lebanon, places like this, which are, or the Coral Castle more recently in Florida, the project of a little man from Latvia who Ed Leedskalnin. If you want to look at that, this is all evidence that there has been a technology on this earth that is capable of erecting those structures, manipulating those massive blocks of stone somehow through the use of the physics of electromagnetism and gravity. And the proof is staring us right in our face. The great enigmas of the world are challenging us, just like 9/11 is challenging us to face the reality, the physical reality, that this kind of science exists. Unfortunately, Tesla was right, and it has fallen into the hands of some of the wickedest and most deceitful and murderous people on the earth. But I would add to that they may not be the only people on the earth right now who are holding the technology. So just because 9/11 shows that directed energy technology was used as a weapon of mass destruction does not mean that everyone on the planet who knows how to use this technology is going to be using it for that same purpose. So we've got to start looking at this whole situation a lot differently than we have up until now.
Yeah, and for the few people out there who haven't heard this presentation yet, take a listen to John's challenge to the crop circle wizards. John, would you like to go on a bit about that, on the connection into the crop circles?
Well, I was inspired to do this challenge to the crop circle wizards by Dr. Judy Wood's work and by reflecting on it over the previous months. Now, I would just point out to those who don't know this yet that there is a reference in her work to crop circles. And
page 333.
In page 333. And there is a study that needs to be made here, a more extensive study, but the preliminary facts are very clear. There are a number of distinct characteristics that occur in crop circles that also occurred in the physical phenomenon at ground zero, 9/11. For instance, the presence of these iron-rich spheres, they are found in crop circles. The way that a crop circle appears to be produced by a template or a cutout, they appear to be cutouts that are somehow impressed upon the grain. Likewise, we find this same cutout phenomenon, which is totally inexplicable by thermite controlled demolition, by the way, this same cutout phenomenon in the ruins of 9/11. And so let's just say that the same principles of physics and the same technology were in use, and they are here demonstrated in two very different ways.
That's right, and it's probably the reason why thermite was chosen as the weapon of choice for the cover-up, because they needed something to explain the occurrence of these tiny iron balls and aluminum balls that they find in the microscopic level.
Oh,
exactly. It's a very clever.
I've got a question. What you mean by thermites? They talk about thermitic material, and I'm wondering if what they're really just referring to, because they aren't saying thermite, they're saying thermitic material now lately. That's the latest version. And I'm wondering if do they mean powdered aluminum and powdered iron rust? There's no doubt that would be there because that's what the buildings were made out of.
Mm-hmm.
And the buildings were turned to dust. The buildings were steel frame structures with aluminum cladding, and steel is 99% iron. You turn that into nano-sized dust, you have nano-sized iron rust and nano-sized aluminum dust.
That's right, and the people who did the operation must certainly have known that. I'm going to assume that they were not chemically, ignoramuses, and they must have known that thermite, this invention of this term, thermite as a military explosive, has similar properties, and so it's a really clever switch. It's a really clever.
And it's not an explosive.
No, it's not.
It burns. It burns things, and the military uses it to melt cannons and to burn paper.
That's right. It burns things. So it's not even an explosive, but because it has these chemical properties, it could be switched and replaced to be a substitute for what the real evidence is showing, So it's very, very clever. It's not an accident that somebody came up, Mr. Jones or whoever is behind Mr. Jones, has started talking about thermite. It's no accident.
Yeah, they're very clever on one level, but on another one, they're very ignorant of how this truth is going to come out. You can't keep that lie up forever. So that,
as long as it's long enough just to run out the clock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been 10 years, yeah.
That's right.
And I think that the 10 years is a magical date, and I think they're trying to seal the lid on this cover-up at this anniversary.
I get the same feeling that they're trying to do that, and at the same time, I get the feeling that there is enough of an awareness that there's something wrong with the game and there's something wrong with their argument. Well, the way they treat you, Dr. Wood, is alerting a lot of people to the fact that there's something wrong with their argument. They can't win either way. If they insult you and ridicule you and refuse to consider your work, they are going to be exposing themselves by that very attitude, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And someone recently pointed out that what reason do people have to attack me?
Right.
And to try to debunk my work, unless it's something they have an emotional investment in, or there's something they're trying to cover up.
That's right. That's right.
If something doesn't make sense, you move on. You don't attack it. You don't want to give it that much time and attention.
Right. The one thing that we infer very strongly, Dr. Wood, from the way you're treated is that you are certainly not irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Actually, I have to, give thanks and acknowledgments to certain people who helped direct me to exactly what was important to look at because of how badly they attacked it. The Greg Jenkins event where, oh, no, nothing went up, all went down, you're an idiot for thinking it goes up. Oh, and it was all very coarse. It wasn't fine. Please, just trust me, it wasn't fine. So, it went up and it was fine. Those are important. Okay.
So by their very attacks, they reveal the thing they want to try to cover up.
Exactly. They're dead center over the crosshairs of, the center of it all. And it actually has been quite easy for me to see where people are, because the opposition is willing to give up anything but this. So they give up, all sorts of various other secrets to lure people in, but they won't give this up. So when I talk with anyone, a friend of mine jokingly refers to me as holy water, like what you flick on someone to see if they're a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
They mention my name, and the reaction you get from people tells you, where they stand, how open-minded they are, or if they're really interested in the truth.
That is so true. You're holy water. Yeah, it really does work. Well, would either of you like to add anything else on to this part of the conversation about the connection into free energy?
Except that if, now that it's revealed,
mm-hmm.
it is, as long as the whole world is aware of it, that means the people who are developing it in secret can now do it in broad daylight once everybody knows about it. If everyone, really is aware of the fact that free energy technology exists, then everyone is free to develop it. And I think we'll see a lot more.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that today, Dr. Wood, in anticipation of this conversation. I'd just like to say briefly what my reflection on this is. It relates very closely to some things I said in my challenge to the crop circle wizards, as I call them. As you know, that's just a term that I invented, that I designate by those people who are or may be holding this technology and know it and want to use it for peaceful purposes. It's perfectly understandable, considering what happened to Tesla and a number of other people through history in the 20th century who've been shut up or murdered, that these people would not want to come out in the open and risk their lives. But the odds are much better now if they come out in the open. Due to 9/11 and due to what you have shown about 9/11, giving proof to the entire world that this energy exists, you've changed the odds of the game. And their lives may still be in danger. It certainly is true that there is a battle going on this planet over who's going to hold this technology and what they're going to use it for. And we'd be naive if we didn't realize that we were in that battle, whether we like it or not. But the odds of the battle have been changed now. And I agree with you, Dr. Wood, that those who are holding that technology can come forth and they will be embraced and surrounded by countless numbers of people who will receive them. And I can't guarantee that they could be protected or that any of us could be protected in this game. But the chances of them coming forth and actually offering to humanity what they hold for humanity are much, much greater, and they're getting better every day.
The listeners may probably start wondering at this point why I'm still alive. I think it's a fluke. I think that they underestimated me. Yeah, my student was murdered, and it looked too suspicious if I was murdered too. And I think it's easier to marginalize women, and in our culture for some reason, and also being by myself, that it made it easier. And I think they were counting on that. But
I think they were counting on using you alive to discredit yourself, as it were, by the various attacks or things they do. It's very difficult to tell what is going on in the mind of insane and murderous people who are out to deceive the entire world. But the fact that they have left you alive is very good fortune for all of us. And I think that there is a kind of game they play. And I think you're absolutely right, Dr. Wood. They didn't see you coming. They underestimated you, and they don't quite know where you fit into their game. And, they're funny people. Unless they know exactly, this is my understanding of their psychology, unless they know exactly how they are threatened, or unless they know exactly how they can profit from snuffing someone off, they don't do it, because they operate on very rigorous terms in their own insane minds. So that's just my... Yeah, that's right.
and if they murder somebody, then it starts it brings more attention to it.
It really does. It's always a big risk they face, that it will bring enormous attention to the message and the truth that person is carrying. And so...
Yeah, and your approach of putting your work out on the internet bit by bit as it came up was also a very good way to avoid being taken out of the picture, because it's already out. Yeah.
Dead people keep secrets.
That is true.
That's
so
true.
I didn't want to be one of those, so I wasn't going to keep any secrets.
All right. Well, we have about I'd say 10 or 15 minutes in this first part of the recording, so let's go ahead and go on to the next question.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So
number 6, because I think we covered number 5 already, Thomas.
Okay. Do you want to go on to question number 6? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
All right.
6. Yeah.
All right.
Number 3.
Yeah. Let's go back to number 3 here, and then we can go on to 6. So you say that, Dr. Wood, your scientific analysis. You okay, John?
Yeah, sure. That's a good idea.
Okay. So your scientific analysis is about the how and the what, not the who. But you did also indicate the who and who would know about this kind of technology? Could you kind of explain that point that you made before?
Well, you first need to start with what happened. You need to determine what happened before you can determine how it happened. And of course, you need to determine what and how before you can determine who did it, because otherwise it's who did what did they do? And a perfect example is this recent big hoopla in the media about Casey Anthony. They were convincing the television viewing audience, apparently, that she was guilty and really promoting that big time. Meanwhile, in the trial, they weren't able to convince the jury of that. And she came back with a not guilty verdict, and so many folks were outraged, saying, wrong decision, we got to go attack the jury. And the next day they had this wonderful juror, Jennifer, I forgot her last name, on the media the next day, and she said it beautifully. She said, well, we don't know how the child was murdered. We don't know how the child died. If you don't know how the child died, how can you find someone guilty for it? What was the act? What was the crime? If you don't know what the crime is, you can't charge somebody with it. So you first need to determine how the child died. And that wasn't covered in the trial. They didn't determine what the crime was. Like, with 9/11, did the towers turn to dust, or they have bombs in them, or what? How do you know who did it? 9/11 Truth Movement was saying is inside job. Well, that means they know who did it. How do they know who did it before they know what it was? If until you've determined what the crime is, you can't charge anybody for it. Not only what the crime is, but how it was done. That's sort of part of what happened. So those are the first steps, and that's what I had done. I determined what happened, how it happened, some type of energy weapon, and I know those who helped cover it up. The contractors on the NIST report, some of them are familiar with energy weapons. They develop and manufacture energy weapons. It was one of them that also has a contract with the government, U.S. government, to know who is developing, anywhere is developing such weaponry, any weapon of mass destruction, who has developed it. So not only would they know what weapon it was, but they would pretty much know whose weapon it was. Because if they know who's developing whatever, they would know what the capabilities are of various entities. So that's why I went after them. But I think it's so important to first figure out what happened. And before you start jumping to conclusions, because if you start with who did it, who did what, and then you're going to back up for, whatever witch hunt story you need, instead of looking at physically what happened in an unbiased way, because that'll bias your observations. You say, well, if so-and-so did it, and so-and-so isn't capable of X, Y, and Z, so therefore it couldn't have been done with X, Y, and Z. So you're already biasing those observations.
Yeah, could I jump in here for a minute?
Sure.
I'd like to to those people who who have trouble, still have trouble thinking that it could have been done by directed energy weapons, and who have trouble believing that these weapons exist. Go to Dr. Wood's website, to the page which is jaw-dropping, which has evidence which is not evidence that she has concocted. It's nothing speculative. It's actually taken from the website of ARA, and also from this other organization. What is it called? NEPS?
SAIC? Oh, Directed Energy Professional Society.
Yeah, the DEPS. Have you ever heard of the DEPS, folks? The Directed Energy Professional Society?
I've never heard of that.
It really exists. And if directed energy doesn't exist, and if it's just a fiction, then how come there's a Directed Energy Professional Society that is linked to a whole number of government contracting agencies from every name that you can think of, such as Halliburton or Boeing or all the great companies and corporations that deal with the military and contract to the military are in this club of the Directed Energy Professional Society. I mean, is this something out of a science fiction writer, or does it really exist? Well, I didn't even know it really existed until I saw the documentation for it on Dr. Wood's site. So if you're wondering about, whether this kind of energy really exists or not, apparently there are a lot of people in corporations in the military and corporate structure who absolutely do believe it exists. And as Dr. Wood said, they ought to have been able to tell us who did this or who holds the devices capable of doing this. And they completely betrayed the trust of the American public in their role of consulting for the NIST report, in that they didn't do that. You see, they didn't do that because they didn't want to point the finger at those people. But we're not that far away from seeing who they are. One thing that continually encourages me about Dr. Wood's work is that although it doesn't say who did it, it makes it possible for us to seriously undertake finding out.
Yeah, I don't know who did it, but I know who knows.
Right. Who knows? And that is not something that only you should know, Dr. Wood. It's not something that you alone should know. Any reasonable, sober person who's willing to spend some time investigating it can come to the same conclusion. So this is absolutely a key point. Now, this gets to another part of this conversation, which we have on the agenda, which I would like to perhaps move to as we move into the second hour here. We're just at 55 minutes. And that is the blame factor as it stands in the current 9/11 scenario, that is to say, the inside job factor.
Mm-hmm.
I would like at some point to discuss that because that's falls into my field of expertise, which is narratives and myths. The story of it's an inside job is a myth. So let's look at how that myth is constructed, and then we can understand something about the psyops that is still operating on us, the psyops that was perpetrated at the same time as these horrific murders were perpetrated. Could we sort of go in that direction?
Yes, Dr. Wood, if
Sure.
you're okay with that, let's go ahead and start going in that, and if we can't finish it in the first hour, we'll pick it up in the second.
Sure. Could I start?
Please.
Sure.
From my experience of what I've seen, people ask me to speculate. I said, well, I don't, can't speculate exactly who did it. I know who knows who did it, but, it would take thousands of people, so therefore it didn't happen. I don't say it takes thousands of people. I've been to visit John Hutchison. I've seen how he can cause the same effects on a much smaller scale, but he's one person plugged with his system plugged into a 110 outlet. So it's not that big of a thing. It's the magic of being able to unlock the door to this energy system. So let's say somebody knows how to do this. Let's say there's also a group of a handful of people, 4, 5, 6 people, somewhere around there, who decide they want to take over the United States. And they don't just go in the front door because the U.S. military will come get them. And that's kind of stupid. But then they know somebody who has this type of device that can dustify the towers and hold a gun to their head or bring them into their club or whatever they need to do and dustify the towers. Then they start a truth movement. And they get everyone in the truth movement to hate their government, to destroy their government from within, and get them to hate their government so badly they want any government but the one they have. And then this handful of 4, 5, or 6 people walk in the front door, and they're welcome with open arms. That is what I kind of see as a strong possibility.
Indeed.
It may not be 5 or 6, but it may be 7 or 8 or somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with that technology, you could just hold the gun to the head of anybody and say, pay up, or this is what we'll do. We'll take out Champs-Élysées, or we'll take out Big Ben as a show of what we can do. Yeah.
Right. Well, I more or less follow that scenario. I'd like to flesh it out a little more if I can, because I've been giving this a great deal of thought over the last few days. And I would just like to spring something on your minds as a kind of a teaser to start with. Just imagine, you know what it is to frame someone, okay? We all know the story. We've seen the detective films many times. A man doesn't kill his wife. Somebody does. But he's framed for the murder of his wife. Okay? Mm-hmm. We've seen that story in the plot many times, right? Let me give you another plot. How about a man kills his wife, and then he's framed for what he actually did? Did you ever hear that story?
Run that by me again.
Someone framed for a murder they actually committed. They're framed for something that they actually did.
Here's an example of that I've often used. That why I say you have to determine what happened before you can determine who did it, how they did it, and who did it before you can arrest them for the crime. So let's say you have somebody standing over a dead body with a smoking gun, and so you haul them into court and charge them with death by gunshot. Turns out they killed the person, but they poisoned them. So there's no bullet hole in the body. The guy gets off, and due to double jeopardy, he can't be tried again.
There you go. That's right. So let's say that some clever twist like that, either the example that I gave, someone who is framed for something they actually did, and then they have a clever lawyer come in and say, oh, my God, you were framed, and they get them off from something they did because it makes them appear as if they were framed and thereby innocent. That plot and the plot that Judy Wood just described, and let's consider that something like that plot happened at 9/11, and it's part of the PSYOPs. And as long as we're caught in the PSYOPs, we're never going to see it. We have to step outside of it. And the big difference, and this is the most important thing I want to say this evening, just about the most important thing, is the big difference between Dr. Wood's argument on evidence of what happened in 9/11 and the Truth Movement inside job argument. Dr. Wood's argument is pure science. It doesn't contain an accusation. But the Truth Movement inside job, which purports to be based on science, purports to be based on architects and engineers and scientists looking at the evidence, does point to a perpetrator. And therefore it is not pure science, you see. Mm-hmm. It is part of the PSYOPs, because the PSYOPs wants us to look at a certain perpetrator. It wants to frame someone, namely the United States government. But the twist in this story that I'm asking you now to consider is that the perpetrators who were framed actually did what they were framed for, but they didn't do it in the way that they thought they were going to do it. And in deconstructing how these events took place on that day, in deconstructing how they took place, we can deconstruct the PSYOPs and get the PSYOPs out of our own minds. The great problem with people recognizing Judy Wood's work, which is truth as clear as crystal water from a spring. Why is it so muddled and so difficult to see this? Because our minds are still in the fog and confusion of the PSYOPs. And the only way we can get out of it is by deconstructing it. And that's what I would like to try to do a little bit this evening. It's the first time I've ever publicly attempted to do this. I'd like to run it by both of you and see what you think of it just as it comes forth.
Well, yeah, I'm very intrigued. I like the way you're going there, and it seems to fit in with how Dr. Wood has laid things out as well. Now, would you two like to go ahead and shut it down for the first hour and pick this up on the second?
Yeah, I hear somebody has a bandwidth issue or something. I don't know who. Maybe it would be good for us all to reboot.
Okay, let's do that in 5 minutes.
Okay. It'll probably take about 10 minutes actually to reboot everything and to save this file.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, so I'll call you back in about 10 minutes then.
Yeah, great.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thanks.
very good.
Bye.
Okay, and welcome to the second hour, and let's just go ahead and pick up where we were. John, you were saying that the truth movement, with the inside job narration that's embedded in it, with its so-called experts, is kind of putting the blame on a particular party, which in this case is the United States government. And you wanted to continue on with that thought.
Yes, what I'm proposing, and I hope in the course of the next 10 or 15 minutes to give not an irrefutable proof of what I'm saying, but to give a plausible and solid basis for consideration. What I'm proposing is that the inside job mantra is part of the PSYOPs. It's part of what's confusing us and dividing us. And as Dr. Wood pointed out, the truth movement has, in a way, 9/11 truth movement has, in a way, torn the United States apart. You know? Now, I'm an American citizen, and I consider myself to be someone who loves the ideal of America. And I know that there are many, many things that have been done wrong by the American government, and that there's a criminal element in the American government. You know, I remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and in my opinion, that was a coup d'etat in front of the entire world, and from that moment on, a criminal element began to take over in the American government. But the criminal element is not the entire government. So what the 9/11 Truth Movement is doing is it is creating a hatred and a distrust of the entire government and the entire structure of the United States, the entire legal and authoritative structure of the United States, which is a terrible thing to happen, you know? And so I think that is an effect of this PSYOPs, and I would like to describe how that PSYOPs was constructed and the purpose for which it was constructed.
Now, I'd like to add something there. That also another facet of this is if that is how the truth movement is seen, those who are trying to decide between was 9/11 the story we were given about 19 bad guys with box cutters, or was it something else? And once they see what the truth movement's up to, then they go back to the first story.
There you go.
So it turns them off to questioning the events as well.
That's right. It does. That's very true. So I would like to proceed. I want to proceed with a little disclaimer to the people who are listening, and that is that what you're going to hear now is absolutely and exclusively from John Lash. And I do not expect that my collaborators in this three-way discussion are in any way implicated or support this. So don't think that because they're on the interview with me, they actually go along with this.
But remember that allow us to support you on it if we agree with it as well, John.
If you, that's fine. But please don't, listeners, please don't assume that Dr. Wood or Thomas Malone are behind me on this, because I've never said this ever in public before. I'm going to give it a try. Let's consider, now that we know, let's take it and say that Judy Wood has led us to the truth. Dr. Judy Wood's scientific analysis is impeccable and irrefutable. The destruction in New York City on 9/11 was done with directed energy weapons of an unusual kind that are known to exist but are unadmitted and are held in secret by the military. Knowing that, we can go on and ask two questions. Why were these weapons used? This is one question. And the second is, why were they used in the way that they were used? Okay? Now, I've been thinking about this intensely ever since we agreed to have this three-way conversation. And I'm convinced that these two questions are probes that can lead us into the core of the PSYOPs that's been perpetrated not just on the American people, but on the mind of humanity itself by the 9/11 criminals. This can lead us to it. Now, let's look first at why they were used. In order to explore that question, I would just take a minute and ask you all to take a few steps back and consider something that we've learned in the last 10 years. And this is not speculation, folks. This is intensely documented research. We have learned that a certain element within the American government called the neocons, consisting of advisors to the presidency and the military had a plan to create a Pearl Harbor type of event. And we know from the Project for a New American Century and other documents that have been written by the neocons that they looked forward to staging some massive event that would be a false flag event. And that this false flag event would be committed in the United States of America, would be blamed on a foreign country, and would give the imperialistic neocon program the green light to go ahead and do what it subsequently did, which is invade Iraq, invade Afghanistan, and pursue an imperialistic power game over across the world. Now, I use this term false flag operation. How many of us actually heard about that term before September 2001?
Well, I was aware of the term, but I wasn't aware of it on the scale, obviously, that I was after that.
I don't know about you, Dr. Wood, but I'm not even sure if I heard about that term before September 2001. False flag operation.
I didn't hear about it, and I guess because of the people I hang with.
Because of what?
The people I hang with, scientists and engineers and so forth, people who need to see it to believe it.
Right. But actually, that term now, and the whole world knows that term. As a matter of fact, we could say that one of the great features of the mass education that we've undergone since 2001 has been, we know now what false flag operations are, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And we can cite them in history, like Hitler's burning of the Reichstag, like the Gulf of Tonkin event. We know that there are many admitted false flag operations used by the American military and the American government for over a century. We know this now. Gore Vidal wrote a book in which he listed the astonishing number of false flag operations that the United States government or a certain faction in the government has used. And so we've been able to put together the picture that 9/11 was a false flag operation. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They got the idea, we need a new Pearl Harbor, we need some catastrophic event, we need an attack on American soil that will justify the agenda of the neocons and this imperialism of their program, which is well known to many people. Oh, so they're planning this, and this is what they think. Well, let's crash some airplanes into some skyscrapers, okay? And let's aim one at the Pentagon, and maybe even let's aim one at the White House, but we won't actually allow, since we're controlling the false flag operation, we won't actually allow it to hit the White House because that would be too much, but we'll say that some heroic people intervened and brought that plane down. So they're planning to do this, and the question comes up again, why would they use directed energy weapons to do it? Well, if they could do it in some other way, they might have done it in some other way. But when you think about it, and it doesn't take too much thinking and some basic common sense here, it would have been incredibly difficult to bring this off using actual hijacked airplanes. Incredibly difficult. First of all, just flying the airplanes, they would have had to have expert pilots to fly the airplanes. Okay, so they could remote control the airplanes. Yeah, but even so, if they were hijacked airliners with people in them, this gets very, very complicated. So what did they decide to do? They decided that they wanted to do that kind of scenario. Let's call it a 4-hole scenario. They wanted to leave 2 holes in the Twin Towers, a hole in the Pentagon, and a hole in the ground in Pennsylvania. And that would be the multiple false flag attack. They would blame it on Islamic fanatic Muslim hijackers, and they would use that to launch their wars. Well, in order to do that, they sat down and they talked to their, suppose they talked to their closest advisors, and their closest advisors said, listen, if we try to do this literally with airplanes and guided missiles and things, it's going to be very, very hard to control. But there is a directed energy technology that we can use to do it, and we can fake it. We can make it look like it's airplanes, but we can use the directed energy technology instead, and it will be infallible because we can really control it. And that way, it's going to be just a few people that have to know about it, because if we're going to do it with airplanes and hijack airliners with people in them, no, we can fabricate all that, which has largely been done, you know. If you go back and look at the evidence, it all falls apart. Who were the people on these airplanes? Or what, you know, it becomes very, very suspicious. So let's just cut to the chase here. They decided that they would use directed energy weapons, which could be in the possession of the American military or could be in the possession of certain allies or alleged allies to the American military. And with directed energy weapons and with simulation devices, such as cloaking of airplanes and things like this, which the military also has, they pull off this false flag attack. So that's why they did it. They had a good reason. But there's a real problem with that explanation. And that is, why did they have to destroy the two towers and create the massive evidence of directed energy weapons at the site in New York City? Why couldn't they have just put in 4 holes?
Because I have the answer.
Yeah, tell me.
Here, by so many of the first responders. It was unbelievable. Everyone was in such disarray. It was all unbelievable. It's like their world had been turned upside down.
You're saying they had to do something that was not just a false flag attack that was in the scale of human belief and comprehension. They had to do something that was an attack beyond the scale of comprehension.
It was because look at Hollywood.
Right.
People are used to seeing stuff on Hollywood. You had to outdo Hollywood.
Right.
It wouldn't have the emotional impact sufficient enough to provide the reasons for the reason they did it.
But let me get back to my evidence.
Yes.
If it was some airplanes or something like that, you know, what I know about the evidence is that even the remnants of Building 6, when they went to take that down, just that little chunk at the end, they had to pull it down with a cable because if they stuck dynamite in it, they were afraid of damaging the bathtub wall. So, you know, if you have a piece of a jet, you know, falling down the bathtub wall or whatever, you're going to undoubtedly end up having flooded Lower Manhattan. If those buildings tipped over, you take out several other buildings. It was too messy.
But suppose it was not necessary for a false flag attack that would justify invading Iraq and invading Afghanistan. Was it really necessary just for that purpose to bring down, or not to bring down, excuse me, here I go again, but to completely justify those buildings and demonstrate more of the directed energy weapons with WTC-7 and the coring out of Building 6 and so forth? Would it have been necessary to go that far?
So you're saying, John, that to reach the ends that they wanted to reach, they could have done it just with the so-called hijacked airplanes, and that would have been sufficient, sufficient force. And you're saying, why did they have to go to this farther extreme?
Exactly. Talk about Hollywood. I think it would have been quite sufficient to simulate 2 jetliners hitting the World Trade Towers, which they did, and to simulate one hitting the Pentagon, and to then make up another heroic story about one that was brought down by passengers, which story is absolutely full of holes, to simulate all that in order to make their point for a case of a false flag attack. But it went far, far further than that. Why? What I'm suggesting, and this is just a suggestion for people to think about, is that the PSYOPs had 2 parts. One part is that it was an obvious false flag operation. And whoever pulled off 9/11 wants the world to think that that's the end of it, right there. And that's why the controlled demolition people are playing into that scenario, one way or the other, as Dr. Wood said. One way or the other, they're playing into it. Because the people who don't believe them have to go back to the Arab hijacker scenario. So it creates an absolute double bind for the mind. But when you set that aside and you say, wait a minute, if the false flag operation, which was actually planned and perpetrated by the American government, was actually incorporated into another operation that was much, much bigger. And it's because of the other operation that the buildings had to be dustified in a science fiction spectacle of magic in front of people's eyes, and the WT7 had to be dramatically made to disappear when it did. That's the second part of the PSYOPs. So there are two parts. This is what I'm getting at. Am I making any sense here?
You're making sense. I want to hear more about this, yes.
I disagree with, like being separate events or separate PSYOPs, or I don't like to make a division. I think it was one big plan, and the cover-up or whatever, the bombs in the building cover story was just a spin version of that. It as for a cover story. What I've seen in it is that 3 + 1 = 4. 3 buildings, 1 in the ground.
Right.
That's not. You're not. Otherwise, you'd be safe if you stayed out of big buildings. You stayed out of the Pentagon. You stayed out of New York City. But the fourth one is, it could happen to you anywhere. You're not safe anywhere.
Right. Right.
And I saw the same thing with a 7-7. 3 in the tube, 1 in the bus.
That's right. You're not safe on the bus either. Yeah.
It's
airplanes, and that's why we have TSA doing what it's doing now, which is a continuation of violence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I agree, Dr. Wood. I think it was all part of one plan. But what I'm looking at, and I'm just asking you to look at this with me, is that the first part of it was that the whole plan was not known to the people who perpetrated the first part of it. This is what I'm
no
suggesting.
No way. I think only a small handful of people knew what was going on. But the people who followed below, because it's so compartmentalized, are just do their job, and they don't know why they chose a particular day to do this exercise, or where they're having a meeting. That's just what ended up happening. They didn't stop to think of why. But
right.
Things get done a certain way, and you don't know why you have a certain opinion at the end of the day.
Well, I think that things get done a certain way. In this case, that 9/11 got done a certain way because the people who did it want absolutely to conceal who they are. They absolutely want to conceal who they are. And what I'm saying is that if we deconstruct the way the PSYOPs was laid down, we may be able to figure out who they are. And I am looking at this now very, very closely in terms of the narrative that was fed to us and the way the PSYOPs was planted in our minds as to how it was exactly seeing how it was constructed. And I think that at this 10th anniversary of 9/11, this is the thing to be doing. Because let's face it, I mean, people have been talking about a false flag attack. 9/11 was an inside job. 9/11 was a false flag attack. And unfortunately, the people who are saying that are still inside the PSYOPs. They're inside it. They're speaking from inside it. And we've got now, after 10 years, we've got enough distance in time. Maybe the trauma's worn off enough, and the confusion is worn off enough for us to step back and say, wait a minute, the only way we're going to see how the PSYOPs is working on our minds is if we get it out of our minds, And I think that the inside job mantra is part of the PSYOPs. It was planted in there in the beginning. It's planted in there to conceal who were really the masterminds of this event. And the masterminds of this event are not necessarily the people who are framed for what they actually did.
But it could be.
It could be, but I have a feeling that it's not. I have a feeling that the criminal element and the neocon fanatics / criminal mafia in the U.S. government, the Bush-Cheney gang, were tricked themselves by the ultimate masterminds of this 9/11 event. Because the ultimate agenda is not just the neocon goals. What if the ultimate agenda is not just the neocon goals? What if the ultimate agenda is something much, much wider, perpetrated and orchestrated from a different location? This is what it's beginning to look like to me as I am in my initial stage of deconstructing the PSYOPs.
So, yeah, Dr. Wood, I want to get your comment on that in a second. But, John, could you, what would be a possibility of what that end desire or end target of these masterminds would be?
Well,
it's just a way to kind of screw with the minds of the whole planet?
Or don't fool with us. See what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is the end objective of the masterminds of 9/11?
Right.
To destroy humanity as such, and because they don't believe that they are a part of it. Now, who would that be? Can you think of anyone who openly states that they're not a part of humanity? Well, anyway, put that on the fridge to think about in the morning. But their goal would be to openly destroy humanity and take possession of the planet as if it had been given to them by a divine mandate. Now, who would want to do that? I'm not saying who, but I'm just saying that that's how big the agenda is behind 9/11, as far as I can tell from my mythological and historical analysis.
I'm with you on that completely, John. Dr. Woodward, you seem to indicate that you feel it's more of a one seamless job there. How do John's thoughts echo in your mind right now?
Well, I guess I'm not trying to go to who did it that easy, because I fear that is an escape as well. That if the walls start closing in too much on certain individuals. Oh, we didn't do it. See, E.T. did it.
Right.
The devil made you do it. That type of excuse. And that's why, humanity is capable of this technology. There's no question of that. But and there are people who are that evil. A lot of people have trouble seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
But, what are, pathological murderers? They don't act like humans. But there's, another thing, of course, this could be part of the cover story, is the buildings were destroyed in a way such to a massive demonstration to the world, like a huge display, but with damaging the least amount of surrounding buildings. That's right. And that, again, that could be a cover for, you talk about somebody framing somebody else, framing themselves.
That's right.
When they're really guilty. You don't know right. Who.
That's right. But I would say this, Dr. Wood, I'm also trying to be cautious. It's difficult to be, but I'm also trying to be cautious, and I'm extremely aware of the risk that you just pointed out about jumping and pointing the finger. Believe me, I am. But I would say this, and I think that this is, I'll just say that in my mind, this is unfortunately an inescapable and brutal fact. That there are two things that we must absolutely know if we're going to survive in a sane world, in a sane, humane world after 9/11. One is we must know how to use that technology that was demonstrated for good. And the second is we must know who uses it for evil. We must know. It is in the nature of the human animal. Is it in the nature of the human species? There have been stories of people who say, a guy came home from work in California in 1974 and found his whole family murdered, in his home, right? And he spent the rest of his life to find out who did that. And we need to spend the rest of our life to find out who did this. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous, I know. But it's more dangerous not to know who did it. Mm-hmm. And the point that I want to make is that the people who did it are using everything they've got to conceal themselves, because their power lies largely in secrecy and deceit. And 9/11 is a challenge for the human race to stand up in a war against secrecy and deceit. And so that is the challenge presented by 9/11, and I'm trying to address it in my way now by introducing a kind of very flawed deconstruction of how the PSYOPs was set up, because the event was set up in such a way that every subsequent aspect of it would conceal who they are. And bringing them out of concealment is going to be more than half the battle.
I guess where I'm coming from on this is that it's sort of like by decriminalizing it, you can find more information. It's sort of that approach, in that if you're into revenge and looking to get somebody from revenge, they're going to keep covered up even more. Mm-hmm. But if you instead focus on the good, focus on developing this free energy, you might get somebody stepping out of the closet more. Or somebody said, well, somebody talked me into operating this gizmo this day. Does this gizmo have anything to do with what happened? That you might get that happening.
This is true. And again, I totally concur with you on that caution. And I wish that I could simply come down on the side of the positive side. But the fact is, first of all, I'm not talking about going for these people for vengeance. I'm just talking about knowing who they are. Once it's known who they are, then we'll see how the vengeance scenario plays out. But vengeance is inevitable in the human equation. Mm-hmm. Vengeance is inevitable. It's not a good motive, but sometimes it is the just and proper response when the full truth of the situation is known. So
revenge might not, it doesn't really solve the problem.
No, I didn't say revenge. I said vengeance. Oh. No, it doesn't solve the problem. But if the perpetrators
it's always just to isolate it. Go ahead.
I'm not making a case for vengeance here, by the way. So let me try to clear that up. What I'm making a case for is, can we, by deconstructing the PSYOPs and seeing how the events of the day were arranged, along with the narrative of those events, can we from that go to the perpetrators? Can we go to the identity and detect the perpetrators? That's what I'm suggesting. Then when we do that, we'll see what happens next. I'm not suggesting we do that for vengeance. I'm suggesting we do it for the sake of truth. Wouldn't you like to know who did it? Who planned it?
That's why I took the people who know who did it, that's why I took them to court.
And you are the only person. I want to point this out to people who are listening here. Many people are accusing everyone from the Eskimos to the Chinese to you-know-who of 9/11. You're the only one who's actually done anything about it and taken concrete and reasonable steps to find out.
That's right.
Well, we know who did it. Why don't we go ask them?
That's right. And you didn't do that, Dr. Wood. I'm pretty sure I can say this. You didn't do that in the spirit of vengeance, did you? You did that in the spirit of wanting to know the truth. Okay?
Yeah, right. And wanting to know, why don't you share that with the rest of the world,
That's right.
Because if it stays in secrecy, it stays in power and control over us.
Mm-hmm. Whoever holds these weapons and whoever used them from 9/11 is alive today, or their heirs are alive today, holding these weapons as we speak, and they have the capacity to hold the entire human race hostage. And I don't like that. I don't want to be held hostage.
I kind of think I kind of think that's what happened to the legal case. I mean, think about the judges in this case. Would they, do you think they'd lasted the first day if this went forward?
But you see, we can't live like that on this planet anymore. I will not live on a planet where I am subject to extortion, where my life is threatened because I'm going to say the truth, where I am being threatened and menaced with murder or worse. I will not live that way. I would rather be dead than live that way. And I think there's a lot of people who share that sentiment. And I think, Thomas, you're on the top of the list.
I was just going to put that in my own voice. Yes, exactly. I'm totally with you on that. Yeah.
I guess that's why it is why I went after ARA to find out. I wanted to put them under oath to ask them who did it. Whose technology is this?
Well, Dr. Woody, it's amazing to me. I mean, you amaze me not only for your genius and the sobriety of your mind with which you've handled this immense question, this immense riddle, but just, the sheer guts of what you did. I mean, absolutely. That, very few people know that you even did that. And would you like to tell now the people listening what you told me that the judge said to you when you walked into the courtroom?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've been hesitant to say it out loud because I don't want to put any judges in jeopardy, but people know who the judges were. One of them said something like, "Y'all have a death wish?"
Yeah, y'all have a death wish. Well, I guess we have a death wish. I don't know. If loving the truth and wanting to live in a world that's free of being terrorized by some maniacs with the ultimate weapon, if that's a death wish, then I must confess that I have a death wish,
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't look like a death wish to me. It doesn't feel like a death wish to me. It feels like the breath of freedom in my lungs. And this is a horrible situation. Whoever has these weapons is holding the whole human race in hostage and very possibly blackmailing and extorting the most corrupt elements of the United States government in such a way to destroy the entire government for the people.
This was the feeling that I had gotten with NIST. NIST to me didn't feel like the enemy. They felt like to me it felt like they were sort of held hostage by something else, some other entity, some other organization, some other something, and they just had their hands tied.
Right, and that doesn't make them guiltless because they're still accessories and accomplices. And right. But nevertheless, in the bigger picture, as we try to construct how this event was arranged, how it was orchestrated, and how it was set up so that the truth of who did it would never come out, this is what we look at. The PSYOPs was set up so that the truth of who did it would never come out. And we can overcome that PSYOPs, and we can see who did it. When we see who did it, we'll deal with them then. But as long as they remain behind secrecy and deception, the whole world has to live under a shadow of fear. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to live in fear.
I see an analogy to, a woman who's been raped.
Mm-hmm.
Should she go tell somebody, or shouldn't she? If she keeps it a secret, she's protecting the perpetrator. She's holding secret his crime.
That's exactly right.
Being able to talk about it is to free herself from that prison and to not keep that guy's secret anymore.
That's a good analogy. It is a good analogy, and I think that what's happening, I've heard a number of people, just like recently, you said it strangely, but it's in the last few days, but it may continue, saying that, they're just fed up with living under fear and living with lies all the time. And the challenge of 9/11 is to raise ourselves up to the point where we have the courage and the sobriety to break through that spell of fear and deceit and see what's really behind it. And the prize of it is free energy. That's the prize. There's a prize in this horror. A great
but
prize.
we also have to look at what free energy means. It's a total change in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. In our economy, in our education, in every aspect of our life, especially in the area of commerce and economy, because it levels out the playing ground, and it gets us out of the drama of false scarcity, and it gets us out of the control of corporations. It gives countries the ability to claim back their sovereignty, completely changes the game all across the planetary social network.
Let me interject something here, which I've recently found quite intriguing in the so-called truth movement. Those who have attacked me viciously for the longest time, I'm talking about going back to early 2006 with my billiard ball thing. When some folks saw it, they put it up on their website. They thought, here's concrete evidence that can wake people up about, the timing issue. And then right after that, they get an email from someone saying, you're going to discredit yourself because Judy Wood's been debunked. That's just nonsense. She's totally unscientific. And the person would quick take it down. This would happen one side after another. And I didn't know who was doing this, and I later came to know. And there's a few other henchmen like this in the top ranks of the truther movement. Come to find out, these people, yes, they have PhDs. You wouldn't believe what their PhDs are in. An awful lot of them in chemistry, in chemical engineering, or degrees. One of them has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and then a law degree, but quite a few of them have PhDs in chemistry. Petroleum.
There you go.
And they're in the petroleum industry.
That's right.
That's an interesting coincidence.
It really is. So if there were free energy devices available and each country could develop their own in their own way, suitable to their own natural resources and their needs, then the master game that uses oil and that is very closely related to wars, wars for oil, that uses oil as a form of control would collapse in a moment. You see, the whole game would collapse, and so anyone who has a dog in that race is going to be likely, if they put their selfish concerns to the forefront, is going to be likely to do treacherous things in order to keep that game going. One of the terrible things that I reflect on a lot is that even when we discover, and I'm getting a feeling that the moment is due, who actually perpetrated this and how they did it and why at 9/11, that's only the tip of the iceberg. It's going to take...
Maybe those covering it up are a good indication.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily show the connection to who did it.
Right.
Because different people benefit. Like those who did the looting in New Orleans, didn't necessarily fabricate this hurricane,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But still, they're covering it up for a reason, and that is a crime in itself.
That's right. The crime of the cover-up is almost equal to the crime of the horror that was perpetrated, and it's going to take generations to sort out who the accessories were. And the accessories and the accomplices are many. But the key thing is, who was command and control of this event? Who gave the orders? Who set up the devices? Who has the devices right now as we speak? This is something that humanity has a right to know. And every single person who wants to live on this planet in a free and happy way can benefit when we know that. We can only know that by deconstructing the psyops that they've embedded into our minds.
Mm-hmm.
Once we're free of the psyops, once we're liberated of the psyops that they planted in our minds, it will be obvious who did it. This is my view.
Can I work in something here that ties into the part of the psyops? Is where does the $2.3 trillion that was reported missing the day before 9/11 tie into this?
Yeah, well...
Is it real? Is it a story or is it real?
Yeah, that's the first question to ask, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's say that it's real. Let's just assume that it's real. Then let's say it was a payoff.
To pay off the start of the truth movement? I'm sorry, I just couldn't help that.
Well, it could be a payoff, a blackmail payoff, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, it's a blackmail. It's a payoff. Every crime. These are crimes like mafia crimes. Go back and watch a few good mafia films and look at the way that they do things. There's always a payoff at the beginning of a big event, a big crime, because everybody involved has to get paid off, and then of course they go around afterwards and kill a number of them off because they don't trust anyone in their own ranks. But it would not be at all implausible that there would be a massive payoff attached to a blackmail operation attached to this event. Mm-hmm. And I want to introduce to people's minds now who are trying to understand 9/11 the concept that it involved a blackmail event. But the people who were blackmailed, namely the Bush-Cheney gang, actually did what they were blackmailed for. So it's a very strange twist. But there was a lot more to the bargain than they expected, you see. Let's say they made a bargain with the devil. Mm-hmm. And the devil said, okay, I'll do this for you. I'll give you the technology, and since we handle security very well, because that's our specialty, we'll make sure that nobody knows what's going on, because we'll lie and deceive, and we'll turn off all the cameras, and we'll make sure it works as long as you pay us off big money. And that was the deal that was cut. And then the diabolic people who did this went way, way beyond what was necessary for a false flag attack, because they have another agenda which uses the United States as an instrument of their ultimate objectives. Now, what if that's how it's set up?
I can find no fault with that scenario in my mind right now.
I tend to think it was this was the game plan from the start.
And by the way, I'm not trying to get the criminal elements in the American government who were complicit in 9/11 off the hook. Please don't read it in that way. I'm just saying that they are guilty as perpetrators, but they were in the game of bigger perpetrators.
But I have a feeling there's a lot of people who, like NIST, they weren't necessarily doing it, but they okay, here's an example. This is how I met Andrew Johnson. Stephen Jones asked Andrew to splice these two videos together. He didn't ask why. He figured Stephen Jones had a good reason for it. So he went ahead and did it. He thought he was helping the cause. This is in 2006. And in an article I wrote up about, Stephen Jones having this spliced together video, that because this is the liquid stuff that pours out the window, it didn't pour out the window just before the tower went poof. There was a bunch of time in between. And that time was removed and those two segments spliced together to make it look like the stuff poured out the window and the building went poof. But I noticed that Stephen Jones does not do it himself. He has somebody else do it. And people think that they're doing a good deed. They're helping the cause. They don't think twice about it. Until after the fact, then go back and say, wait a minute, I got hoodwinked in that. They don't realize it at the time.
Well, some people realize that. Yeah, some people never do realize that.
And so, how far up the ladder do you go, or how far back do you go, as to who is, innocent, naive, and just doing their job, and then after the fact, it starts eating on them. They say, wait a minute, I happen to push this button at this time, and they start wondering why they did it, and I wonder how much, because Stephen Jones has done a fairly good job keeping his hands clean, having other people, like even the quote of, it takes 5 times the Earth's energy output to destroy the towers. He never claimed it as his own calculation. He always cited somebody else's calculation. And just like Jim Fetzer starts up all sorts of rumors about me, but he gets other people to state them so he can quote them. And then he claimed he was just quoting them, and he didn't. They keep their hands clean. And so if you look at that type of thing with the whole operation, wouldn't it make sense that it was somebody who kept their hands clean and somehow was able to psyops others into, turning this knob, pushing that button, whatever?
That would make sense. That would really make sense, and that is a very sophisticated form of treachery, and it's very skillful, and it makes a lot of sense.
If you look at the truther movement, it's the same thing. These people believe strongly in what they're doing. Some of them are waking up, but they believe they're doing a good deed, and what they're doing is covering up the crime.
Right.
And they don't realize it.
And they don't realize that they are. That's right. Well, it sounds to my ears that you're both saying the same thing, just in slightly different terminology. And John, you were going into a point there a little bit ago where you were saying if we found out who did it, that even if we find that out, that would be just the tip of the iceberg, and that you're indicating that there's something even beyond that. When we find out who did it, and the world...
Well, if you find out who did it, they haven't aimed at you, and that's the last thing you know.
That's right. When we find out who did it, that'll certainly be a great moment of liberation for the human species. But after that, there's going to be an enormous cleanup job, because once it's known who did it, then people are going to be able to look around at every sphere of life that they're in, politics, the media, government, military, education, and they're going to be able to see those people who were accessories to it, either wittingly or unwittingly. And that's going to be a lot of accounts to sort out. And I'm not a person who's here preaching revenge. Never. Vengeance, well, vengeance has its place, and vengeance will have its due in this scenario if the truth comes out. There's no way you can avoid it, because it's inherent to human nature. It's natural to human nature.
Of course, yeah. Once we find out who did this and what the agenda was, yeah, the natural response is to eliminate that or take care of it. Yeah.
We're going to sit back and have a laugh and say, "Oh, well, finally we caught you. You really pulled one on us, but we see it now, and it's all over, and we forgive you, and let's all go out and have
shake hands and have a pizza." Yeah.
No, here's a different thing that light bulb just popped on here is, the Haida lived on those two main islands for somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 years, so I understand.
That's right.
And they didn't mow down each other. They didn't mow down other cultures. They just lived within their means. And let's say we end up having that. It's a totally different type of life. There's this issue of control, he who controls the energy controls the people. But if we don't have that issue with energy, we don't need a control structure. If there's no control structure, then whoever has this gizmo cannot have control over us.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's a huge point.
That's a very good point. In fact, when the knowledge and access of that technology comes into this world, and that is possible now, especially with your work, Dr. Wood, pointing to its existence in the minds of many people now, it changes the rules of the game so radically. But at the same time, these perpetrators are not going to walk away with, their tails between their legs, excuse me for saying so, and that is something that will have to be faced when the moment comes, what to do with them. They won't just say, "Oh, you've got a great world, you've got the free energy now, we're just going to leave you alone." It ain't going to happen. They wouldn't have gone as far in their menacing, odious, hateful destruction as they've gone if they were the kind of people who would turn around and walk away when they're exposed. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to be realistic here. I'm not trying to beat the war drum and get anyone on the revenge trail. But I am saying it's natural. It's a natural inference of your work, Dr. Wood. I have to say so. It's a natural inference of your work, although your work does not say who. People really want to know who when they read your work.
Here's another thing. I guess I keep focusing on the positive, because if we have, for example, I worry about people at NIST. They have a gun to their head. They're afraid to speak out. Their job is to give the answer that somebody told him to get. And fired it. That's the answer. Okay, I'll figure out how to jimmy my model in order to get that answer. And that's what we're taught in our educational system too, is how to get the answer in the back of the book. But if the control structure is no longer there, if they don't fear losing their job, if it's a different structure altogether, they're more free to say, "Oh, it was that guy who told me to get this answer." And the control mechanism comes off, and more information comes out as a part of this new civilization.
I think that's brilliant. I like very much what you're saying there, and I think that is not wishful thinking. I think it's very plausible that it could happen in that way. And certainly you're right. Those who now are under pressure, are under threat, who cannot speak, would not be so threatened in that future alternative scenario. You're absolutely right.
And as the lid gets gradually lifts off, we're going to have a huge readjustment of things. But if the game is no longer about a top-down control issue, and it's all about a contributory kind of establishment instead of a control.
That's right.
Then I think it helps take care of itself. Yeah, you find the malfunctioning person and they get isolated. Maybe get put in a cage someplace where they can't hurt anybody again, or whatever the scenario is.
What do you say to that, Thomas?
Well, yeah, and I think once that environment is set up, that more of the real truth of what has actually happened and who is behind it. Once that door starts to become opened, it's much easier, like Dr. Wood has just said, to allow people to come out and say, "Hey, I just did what I was told to do." That it could all unravel in a very, very quick matter of days or weeks.
It could indeed unravel very fast. Yes. So that's the threshold where we stand, really. I mean, we look. To me, the 9/11 is really a threshold, and we stand on that threshold and we look at what lies beyond it. Both the positive and the negative, if you want to call it negative.
Living in fear and running for cover and giving up more freedoms, it's like giving up your life.
It is, really.
Mm-hmm. You don't get it back.
No, you don't get it back. You don't get it back.
The truth will set you free.
Absolutely.
This is what has been said. The truth will set you free.
Now, we have kind of a final question here. We've already gone into it quite a bit already. But before we get into that, there's one thing now that I have both of your ears here that I would like to ask that's always been on my mind about 911, and it ties into the PSYOPs, is how do we deal with the implants, in a sense, that were put into the media? These things you see all over on the Internet with the encodings that were put into The Simpsons and into Hollywood movies, and there's too many of these synchronicities that took place to just write them off as just mere coincidences. I'm just wondering what your two thoughts are on that side of perhaps the PSYOPs.
Well, you have Godzilla climbing the Empire State Building, or whatever.
King Kong,
King Kong. The towers were, because they're the tallest in the world. The Eiffel Tower is in lots of stuff as well. Because the towers were for several years were the tallest towers in the world. Of course, they're going to be seen as the target of America, and that would be in a lot of things. 911 is kind of code for emergency or for panic or dire situation.
Mm-hmm.
There's white flags, same thing. There's a lot of different clues, but how you end up putting them together is a different story. It also, I think if you want to talk about conspiracy stuff, look into who organized the 93 bombing, because that helped prepare people's minds to think, well, they tried before, now they succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
It was a primer for it. It is what it looked like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise it would be too unbelievable. Whoever brought this about had to have a lot of psychologists on board who know the human psyche so well.
So I would say, if I could take my turn to respond to that.
Please.
It's a really daunting and troubling question. All of these coincidences, associations, illusions in the media, illusions in films, predictive scenes in films, in music, and everything you can imagine. Very, very troubling. One thing I would warn about is that if you start going to investigate them, you can really go out of your mind trying to figure them out. And they, in a sense, become a part of the derangement, the general derangement of the human psyche that has been produced due to the impact of this horrific event. I would say this question came up also with Heinrich on the last interview I did on Red Ice Creations. He said, how can it be that there are all these extraordinary coincidences, and it seems like this trail of clues has been laid in so many ways? I would just say this, I don't have an answer to that, a definitive answer, but the human psyche, the collective human psyche, is like an echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
And it operates through subliminal cueing devices. This is actually how the human psyche works. And so if you suggest a cue into the human psyche, even intentionally or non-intentionally, the whole structure of the psyche will begin to resonate with that cue in one way or another. So we must be aware of the way the human psyche works, but at the same time, not be swamped and confused by its workings. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll only know who was complicit in 9/11 when we know who did it and how they did it in terms of arranging the events of that day. Then we will begin to know, one person at a time, who in the media was complicit. As you say, Thomas, the whole thing will unravel. The whole ball, twisted, tangled ball, will unravel. And then it will become known. The truth will set us free, and we will know who were the actual accessories. And I have to say, I'm not one of those, and I sure wouldn't want to be one in what's coming in the future if the truth is known.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's only natural in human nature that when that much grief and confusion and harm is caused, that there's going to be a payback.
Or even those who covered it up. Who helped
even
cover
those
it up.
Yeah.
Yep, and those exactly. Who helped to cover it up? Who helped to muddle it up? Who helped to derail it? It's all going to come out in the wash.
It will. The truth will fall on them just as surely as the towers did not fall.
Exactly, and I would also mention who tried to keep your book from being published for many years. Dr. Wood.
Right. You're asking a question, or?
Well, no, I'm just adding that point that's the spotlight's going to be shown on those people as well.
Right. And those who just muddle it up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of things. We've opened the door on a lot of very deep questions. So let's, in the final minutes here we have, let's go into the big question in a sense of, where do we go from here? How do we make the events of 9/11 into a positive thing for humanity? And we've talked about it a bit, but I would love to hear both of your comments on how to go from here.
The more the truth is known, the more the change can happen. If let's say, just imagine, everyone is alerted to look at the picture on the cover of my book and say, is that a collapse? And be honest with yourself. They don't need to speak out loud. And if they realize that free energy technology exists, if everyone around the planet realizes this, then we've won.
Mm-hmm.
Free energy technology can be developed, and once it becomes that it can be developed, who's going to want to outlaw it?
That's right.
People want to control, and so if we figure out how to just live life with that in a very complementary way with each other, and look at the Haida, live like that, where we learn to, we learn about life. We we observe how birds migrate south for the winter, and why do they do that? And we can look at how flowers grow. So many different things we can explore and look into instead of running on a treadmill that goes faster and faster and faster, because that's really not living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at the Haida and look at the Japanese as well, I would add, from my perspective.
Yes, and many indigenous peoples around the world who have lived in the same sane way, in human scale, who have lived, as Dr. Wood says, complementary to nature and complementary to each other. We can live that way. I use the term divine experiment. It's kind of a grandiose term, but what I really mean is learn from nature, observe from each other, learn together, discover the secrets of nature, draw upon her bounty, and be of mutual aid to each other, enjoy each other, and get along and have a good time. This is what we all want to do. And there are some people who don't want to do that. So they have created this problem, and they have hijacked this technology for destruction.
This culture. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
This culture that we have too. It's as I often say, there's two kinds of people. There's the live and let live, and then there's the kill or be killed.
Right. Yeah.
And they don't mix well.
No, they don't.
And the kill or be killed type tends to take over, and that's what's kind of happened. But if we go back to the live and let live type, then we get to live. We get to experience life. This other, a treadmill, I call it, that we're on. People are so busy working to pay for their house, to pay for their car, to be able to drive to work, to pay for the house, and pay for round. When do they ever get to go out and look at the trees?
That's right.
Look at a turtle, walking around in the leaves.
Talk to a turtle.
Yeah. And see, look at two cats and how they interact and how really do communicate. How do they communicate? They know what the other one's thinking. If you have a cat and when you've been feeling sad, they'll come up and lick your hair or something. They know. Right. How do they know? To be able to wonder about those kind of things. But otherwise, you're just too busy, working to buy the house, to buy the car, to work, to round and round. That's not living.
No.
I think that the discovery of free energy is not just the discovery of a technology, but it's really the owning of a part of our consciousness that we've lost, which is a primordial and innocent and pristine part of our consciousness. And we reclaim back that part of our own minds through the recognition of this technology. It has a psychic and spiritual component, if you will, as well as a technological component. And so that is the opportunity. 9/11 is a fantastic opportunity. If anything changes, if the tide changes, that's how it would change, in my view. It would change toward a great flow toward that opportunity.
I think that's excellent. Exactly. As we're not really living now.
No.
And we can use this to get back to living life, experiencing life. As I say about life is a set of experiences. And if you haven't had many experiences other than, the treadmill, that's not much life.
Absolutely. I think what you two have laid out for us today is a very big step in getting back to that kind of a lifestyle, maybe one that we actually haven't had for thousands of years, if we've ever had it at all. And in closing here, I would like to, on a very practical level, point people who are not up to speed on these two points to get Dr. Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go?, and to listen to the audio that John made last week called The Challenge to the Crop Circle Wizards. These are two things that you can use to arm yourself with information and with inspiration. So we're at the end of our time here today, and it'd be kind of trite for me to even say thank you to what you two have done, because it goes beyond the scale of words to express my appreciation to both of you. But that's the only words I can say in closing, is thank you very much for everything you've done and for what we have ahead of us. So if you two would like to close with a couple of words there, please go ahead and do that.
Well, thank you for bringing us together in this format, too. It's wonderful, and letting us share our thoughts. I'd give my website address. The regular website is drjudywood.com. That's Dr. Judy Wood, both four-letter words, .com. And the book site is wheredidthetowers.go.com. No spaces, just wheredidthetowers.go.com. And on the book site, the Where Did the Towers Go site, there's a link I've just recently put up on the menu for shows. And one of the most recent ones at the top has that crop circle video. Mm-hmm. So if someone needs directions to get to that, John Lash's crop circle video. That's where it is. Thanks.
Very good. Yeah, and I will put those links up on the when I post this talk as well. John, any final words?
Well, you're the one to be thanked here, Thomas. After all, you're the one who introduced me to Dr. Wood, and extremely grateful for the pleasure of that connection. And we shall continue in whatever way the truth shows us. So thank you both.
Thank you, too.
Thank you both, and we will continue with our friendship and with our working together here in the future as well. So with that, I thank you all for listening, and we will call it a day.